Every single time I drive past this place, I get this weird feeling that I can't really describe. I don't know whether it's good or it's bad, but it feels like, it sounds really silly, but it feels like a part of me is actually here. It's so strange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember all the things that I've forgotten from this place, because I've got so many memories that are just like deep down inside. So I'm going to actually try and recall them all and find out how I actually feel about it. It'll probably be good for you guys as well to remember if you have been in hospital when you was younger, because it's a very different place. Hospitals now are very different from what they used to be. This is Pendlebury Children's Hospital. It's now been turned into flats and apartments and houses, but this was once an amazing place. So Pendlebury Children's Hospital is where I got diagnosed when I was 5, and up until about 12, 13 I was there and I was on the wards there, and then I got transferred to Booths Hall Hospital because I think the CF unit moved from Pendlebury to Booths Hall. Pendlebury is where most of my memories lie. I lay in bed about 2 days ago on Caftrio. I've not been able to sleep, so my mind's been doing overtime, and I lay there and I just started recalling everything from when I was there, and it was crazy how much I'd actually put in the back of my head that's actually in the back of my mind that I don't recall daily. But every time I drive past the place it sparks a few of them. So I just thought it'd be good to see what I remember, and I'll probably remember new things as I'm sat here, and I just think it might be interesting to go through it and process some of the emotions that I've got. So the first thing I remember is you've just seen the front of the building. It's got big doors, and you walk straight in and you're greeted with a massive long corridor sprawling all the way back, and it's a big straight line. It's quite I'd love to go back there now and walk through it, because it's quite unique and quite intimidating almost to stand at the door and just look straight down this big corridor with all kinds of wards and different functions on each side and just people going through it. It was a really busy hospital, but it had a really nice feel to it, a really simple feel, where it wasn't complicated to get around it, from my memory anyway, because what you've got to remember is, at this point, I'm really young and I'm remembering it now from a child's eyes, so I'm just going to explain it how I remember it, if that makes sense. So you walk in, and you've got the big corridor on your right, and it's to the front near the windows on the picture. So on the right side at the front you've got the cafe, which I went in there with my mum and dad every now and then for a treat. And I remember the stairs kind of went down towards the window and you could see into the car park, and I was used to get excited about coming there in the mornings because it was a bit of a treat, and you get a really nice bacon butty. The bacon was like rubber, but it was nice rubber. It was strange, but I really enjoyed having a bacon butty there, and I really enjoyed spending time in there with my mum and dad. So you come back out of there, you're back in the main hallway, and you're walking down. There used to be a radio station, Lollipop Radio it was called, and it used to play throughout the hospital on the wards and everything. It was fantastic. You used to be able to put your name there and they give you a shout out and loads of other stuff like that. So I can picture that on the side there, their little radio office. I think I went in there once because they came round on the wards and they asked us, does anyone want to go and see the radio station, the office? So I think I've been in there once. I can't remember it dead well. I just remember some radio equipment in a small room. But that was amazing. That was really uplifting to hear things that were going on in the hospital and in the area, and also fun competitions and things you could do. On your left, you've then got a little gift shop. I remember this because it had teddies going all the way around the top, and they were like in bags, like to look neat, like a hamper, and they were all around the top of the room. And the main thing I remember from this is it had them, little squidgy bottles, the plastic, and then you squidge the top off, and they've got like sugary drink inside them, and they're a bit minging, but they're nice because they're minging. I remember I used to always go there and get one of them and my mum and dad for a teddy. And to be honest, I had loads of teddies out of there. And they'd always give in and get me a teddy because I was in hospital. Why wouldn't they? You know what I mean? When I was in hospital, you know, not to sound spoiled, I tended to get anything that I wanted at that time. And, you know, I was a kid and knew how to use that. Every year I went in, my mum would buy me something really nice. So that ranged from, you know, a new video when I was younger, new computer game, ended up with me getting a chipmunk, which we thought was going to be like an hamster, would, like, you know, live like 2 or 3 years. 12 years he lived, Alvin. So you come out of the gift shop, and then you've got your wards. Now your wards, if I remember correctly, were on each side as you go down, and there were quite a few. As someone with cystic fibrosis, they didn't have an actual CF ward, so every time I went in I was on different wards. I think there's about 3 or 4 that they mixed it between. So I got a different ward every time, but you get the same experiences on the wards because they all look the same. And I'll go into that in a second. Going past that, you've got like the smoking room, which is weird to have a smoking room inside a hospital these days. It just doesn't make sense, does it? So what I remember out of that is when my mum and dad were visiting me at night and stuff, it was a bit of a treat for me to go and stand in the break room, which was adjacent to the smoke room. I'm talking about the corridors, 2 big like stuffed donkeys, and they were massive, and I always used to want to get on them, but mum and dad never let me. Plus you weren't really allowed. I had a big sign saying don't jump on the donkeys, but they were like the main feature when you're walking down. You was always impressed by these donkeys. It was fish tanks and everything, but there was these massive like 6-foot donkeys, and they were fantastic. I hope they got auctioned off when it closed because they were wonderful. They make you smile as you're just walking through. And from my memory, if you go outside into the back, into the gardens, they had this amazing aviary. And it had loads of different birds in it, and it was just really, really nice when you've been sat in the hospital, in the wards all day, to come out and just have a look at it. Because even then, even though you're young, and, you know, bird watching isn't your thing, when you're in hospital, and you go out and you see something like that, it's fascinating watching them all fly around, going in little holes. When you actually go into the wards, the setup was similar for all of them. So you go into the ward, it's a big room. You might have a few little small rooms where they keep babies, you know, separate, but as a child I was never kept separate, so I was always in the general ward. Like nowadays, with the CF kind of thing, you end up in your own room because you can't contaminate with other people, but back in the day, you just went in the general ward. So come in the door, you've probably got a nurse's station there, and then you've just got a few rooms there, maybe 1 or 2, and then you've got bed, with very little space in between. All the walls and the ceiling is usually decorated with bunting, and there's loads of pictures and stuff like that. When you walk in, it's a really, really nice place. It's a nice place that you'd want to go for 10 minutes, have a look around and go, oh, that's nice. Not really stay there, but to be honest, they did the best to make it look nice and appealing, bright and colourful, and it really was. It was really colourful. You get a bed number and you go to it, and then you start putting your stuff around. So because there's no room, you've got your bed there, you've got a few spaces, and you've got someone else's bed. And it's like when you go in, you're too young to really care, but now you'd be like, oh God, what's my neighbour going to be like? They're going to be snoring, they're going to be fighting, all that stuff. So entertainment wise, they had TVs on like a thin cabinet that they wheeled out to you, and there weren't enough TVs for everyone, so you had to practically beg for a TV, and then you had to try and keep it for as long as you could, because if you went home for half an hour or went out of the ward, someone would guarantee that someone would unplug it and put it in their bed. We used to watch videos and normal TV, which is weird to think about. You just have to put a big video in and watch it, you know, rewind it. I must have watched Mr. Bean about 50 times. And TV would be switched off at 8 or 9. I can't remember if it was 8 or 9, but that was so everyone else could sleep, because obviously you're all in each other's space. Throughout the years, I've been bunked up next to so many different people with so many different conditions in different stages of their life, that from a very young age, you learn about conditions which you haven't got, and you get an appreciation for conditions like epilepsy, Down syndrome, people having the tonsils out, people having the stomach pumped, you know, cancer. There was all kinds of conditions that you're exposed to. So in a way, when you go there, you feel really, really connected to everyone. I made loads of little friends, you know what I mean? You'd all be like wheeling around at the bottom of the ward in the play bit, because you'd usually have a load of toys at that end. When I didn't spend time, you know, looking at the door waiting for my mum or dad to come. You know, I was playing with other kids and generally having a good time, or watching a video over and over and over again. They used to have a video cupboard where you could go and pick some videos, and obviously you had to return them if your TV didn't get nicked before you even got back. I can't remember the first time I went into hospital, I can't remember the first time I went to a ward, but I know for a fact that in these ward visits in Pendlebury's Children's Hospital, that's where I learned resilience, in the form of, you knew you was going to have intravenous injections, and let me tell you, back then they were a little bit horrendous. So it'd be the same kind of thing, they'd put a butterfly needle into you, but they wouldn't have sort of the high-tech tools they've got now, and they'd literally put this metal thing in you, the blood would be pouring out, and they'd get the thread, the line, and they'd thread it all through, like literally with tiny bits. It'd pop out, the needle would pop out, they had to do it in separate things. Every time I had an intravenous line put in, it was about 8 or 9 tries. Even to the point where my dad, who used to be scared of blood before he had an heart attack and he had everything done to him, he collapsed because it was that bad. It weren't nice at all. And you knew that was coming when you got in, and you knew you couldn't get out of it, and you had to do it. What I used to do was, I used to give it this magic cream that you put on it on in like the bandage, you know, and wait half an hour, 40 minutes. That cream does jack shit. I can tell you now, it still used to work, it still used to scare me, but what it did make me do eventually, it gave me the resilience to deal with things that I know are coming, that I can't avoid, that I can't change. So in a way, it made me quite strong, because you know something's happening, you accept it, you process it in your mind, and then you get on with it. And that's the way I've lived my life through every single medical procedure that I've had. It's got to happen, I'm going to live, it's going to make me better, something that's necessary, so let's get it done. And that's continued with me until 33, and the only place I can think that that's come from is that scenario. And at the time, I would have been deeply, deeply sad about it every time I went in. It would never have been easy. I remember sitting there on the edge of the bed waiting for the doctors to come round and do ward round. And I used to be sat there thinking after 10 days, oh, do you think they'll let me go home? And me and my mum used to sit there, and my dad with our fingers crossed going, they might let you go home today. Because it was different then as well. Like back then, the doctors, I love doctors. I'll trust my life with my CF team because they've got me here and they've done everything. But then doctors felt like this and you felt like this. So if a doctor had a discussion with me now and said, I think you should stay in hospital, that discussion would be between me and him, and I'd tell him if I wasn't going to stay. But back then, if the doctor said something, you just did it. So we was all sat there just waiting for the doctor to come and say, you know, you can go home. And I remember the doctors coming a lot of times saying, you can't go home, we need to keep you for 4 days. And I remember crying my eyes out and like being inconsolable, you know, mum and dad consoling me. So there's a lot of sad times attached to it. But when I think back, and when I think back now, all I can remember is happy. And it's weird because even though they were quite sad times, I now consider them some of the best times of my life. There's a few examples in specific, and if I've had a bit to drink, I usually get a bit emotional at these. I don't think it's going to come now because we're talking on camera, but I remember, you know, it was a normal day. Yeah, my dad had bought me a Mr. Bean video. He bought me, I can't remember what season it was a yellow one, and I'd put it on, and me and him were watching it. Because me and my dad have got the same sense of humour, we'll laugh at anything, I'll still laugh at Mr. Bean, I love it. Watching it, and we noticed that slowly but surely, everyone around the ward, about 5 or 6 beds, were kind of, you know, listening in, looking at it, and, you know, laughing. And, you know, they couldn't really see the TV, so we ended up turning the TV round, and literally 6 or 7 of us all watching Mr. Bean together. I remember one guy had his tonsils out and he was coughing up blood and crying, and he was really upset, and then we all put Mr. Bean on, and we was all literally like a little family for 2 or 3 hours. So that sticks in my mind as one of the greatest memories that I've got of me and my dad. And, you know, it's a really, really fantastic memory, that, because it reminds me that even though they were hard times, I had the full support of my mum and dad. They were there for me. They used to sleep Yes, this is it as well. You used to have like a bed. You had your bed, and they had like this horrible looking, uncomfy as shit looking couch. And I always remember going to bed and waking up and even my mum or my dad lying there. And there was also an option to stay in like a separate room for parents, but that kind of got shut down because two people had sex in it, so they stopped doing that. So my mum and dad had to use the horrible chairs. And to be honest, they were there without fail, day in, day out. Taken through them times when they must have been struggling as well. They were as strong as they could be for me, and I was trying to put on a brave face and be as strong as I could for them. So we've helped each other really through it. And all these times in the hospital, like when I got a bit older, me and my dad playing N64 like all day. But they always made sure that I felt completely happy and completely loved, and I think that was one of the most important things that they've ever done for me. It's one of the most important things you can do for a human being. Sometimes they had to go home because obviously they work and stuff like that. And there was a time where my mum said to me, she was like, listen, I can stay over if you want. I've got to go work at like 6:30, but I can stay over. And I was like, oh no, I'm a big man now. I'm a big boy now. So I got my little action man. She went home. It's a scuba diver action man. I got that, and I was cuddling in bed at about 10 o'clock. And you know, as I was a little kid, so I was feeling a bit lonely. She'd already gone home. And I just started crying, and I ran to the nurse's office. And the nurses back then, by the way, in the little office, they could drink, which was weird. They all had a can of something. They did pretty much anything they wanted in that little nurse's office. You could hear them cackling all night. It was crazy. I ran to the nurse's office, crying my eyes out, and I was like, I want my mum. I was like, she just holding me action man, screaming, I want my mum. God bless her, she was working in the morning, so she probably would have been knackered. And she said, well, we'll phone her and we'll see if we can get through, go back to bed. So I went back to bed crying. Anyway, half an hour later, she turns up, and then she sat with me all night, and she's gone to sleep on the couch. And I just, for some reason, that sticks in my head over anything, over any memory, because my dad would have done the same if he went taxi driving, don't get me wrong. But for someone to just come back at that time of night and, sit with me all night, and I remember going to bed, smiling and waking up, and she was there. And it's just probably that Mr. Bean memory and the scuba man, action man memory are probably the best memories I've got. And they're probably part of the reason why when I look back on the time at the hospital, all I can do is smile. There's a lot of things I could remember and I could go into, and there's a lot of sad times, but I'd still say my time at Pendlebury Children's Hospital was some of the best times of my life.